what we would like to do is to invite the citizens who are present in this audience for at least a few minutes to address the commission with any questions that they may have, any suggestions they may have for how the commission goes about the remainder of its work. Yes, in the very back, I see a hand.
Yes, I welcome any comments on the role of our Senator Burr.
The question is, she welcomes any comments on the role of our Senator Burr. Anybody want to take that on the commission? I'm not seeing any takers. Larry?
I'll take a little bit of it on because I've been on the Hill a lot the last 3 weeks, essentially working, trying to get the United States out of an illegal war, the war in Yemen. And so I've had opportunity to talk about everything from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear agreement with Iran, to issues like this, torture in the Senate report and so forth, with senators on both sides of the aisle and representatives on both sides of the political aisle. At first, people were, even of his own ilk, a bit concerned with the way his more or less authoritarian running of the committee was going. No one more so than the ranking member from my state of Virginia, Warner. That seems to have turned around with the current investigation by the Sisi into the so-called Russia problem. And there's a growing respect for him in the Senate now, and for Warner too, for the way they are going about this in a bipartisan manner. Now, whether this is subterfuge or not is anybody's guess. Are we going to turn around and find out that the Senate Select Committee has done absolutely nothing in this regard and that Bob Mueller's doing everything? I don't know, but I just say that the appreciation of him in Washington on both sides of the aisle has changed dramatically since he was more or less condemned by the Democrats in particular, but some Republicans too, for essentially trying to destroy the report. That's what he tried to do. He tried to destroy the report so no American citizen would ever get to read it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple. I mean, first, just so much a follow-up. Like, what plans do you have to try to get this in the hands of decision makers? You know, there have been many worthy endeavors, the Constitution Project, lots of studies. I'm an academic, and it's a wonderful moral exercise, but the frustration is that it ends up having no consequence. And then I would love it if you all would really think what connections and power, maybe through Colonel Wilkerson, you can leverage so that somebody in the halls of power is listening. That's the first one. And the second one is, would you seriously consider working with the ACLU, maybe CCR, whomever, to really contemplate aiding the bringing of a lawsuit against ARROW, which it seems like there's been a lot of, sentiment in favor, at least considering it as a real possibility, which could be landmark for all the legal difficulties in the ways that we've discussed. Would you take that kind of role of really puzzling that out?
So just to repeat the question, there were two parts to the question. The first one was, what are you going to do to make sure that the report gets in the hands of those in power that are making the decisions and gets listened to? And secondly, are there any efforts or hopes that the report could be used in conjunction with the ACLU or other litigating entities to bring a lawsuit against ARROW?
Well, I will take that on in part, and I really urge the other commissioners and also Catherine and the rest of the folks who work with us to chime in on this. But, our mission is to assemble the record and do that as thoroughly and deeply as we are able to do. And we still have outstanding public record requests to various public agencies. We are inviting other people to submit information to us, to give testimony to us, and we will assemble all of that and then make findings and make recommendations. And we do intend very much to deliver that final product to those who are in power and those who are able to take some action with respect to the findings that we make. Local district attorneys, attorney general, governor, political officials, whoever it might be that would be an appropriate recipient we certainly will do that. I think, to answer the second part of the question, that the way we could aid organizations who are going to bring civil litigation, that's not our function, but I think the information that we develop certainly could be provided to those organizations as well to aid them in bringing litigation if litigation is warranted.
If I could just add one thing.
Yes.
I don't know if she's still here. Representative Insko, I think she may have left. But I just wanted to echo one of the things that she said, which is we have to elect different people.
Yes.
One of my goals as with my colleagues is to also look for ways that we can make this part of a political ask of candidates at the local, at the state, and at the federal level, that they tell us what they think about this issue, about accountability and about torture. And I'm going to write my state senator when I go home, Bob Woodard, and see what he says, because I think he's on board, but we'll see. But I think we need to make it matter to our state officials, in particular in North Carolina, and I think that's certainly one of the ways that we want to bring the conclusions and the recommendations to some sort of forum where they have some bite.
Thank you. I think our Executive Director, Catherine Reed, has a comment too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say.
You want to use the mic?
Thank you all for, yeah, sure. Firstly, thank you all for coming. But this is a citizen-driven commission, and so we want your ideas for how we make sure that this report doesn't just sit and gather dust on a shelf. We want impactful, creative ideas for recommendations, which may go all the way from, are there ways that we can bring suits against aero contractors and others? But also, one of the examples I always give is an organisation that was represented here today, a former employer of me, was the Centre for Victims of Torture. Centre for Victims of Torture was the idea of a governor's commission in the 1980s in Minnesota, when the then governor was asked by his son, what are you doing for human rights in Minnesota? So he had a commission to look into different ideas, and we're going to look at that commission and the other ideas that they came up with, but one of those was to establish the first torture treatment centre in the US. So it doesn't mean the recommendations that we come up with as a commission can be also forward-looking, and how do we make North Carolina a human rights leader going forward? They don't just need to be ways that we're looking backwards on how can we atone for this period of history, but also looking forward. So I think we really have to think creatively, and we're looking for all of you here who came and or obviously care about this issue to help us think about those creative ideas and recommendations so that we can make this a living document that citizens like Christina and Alison that we heard from today that have been fighting this fight for a long time can have concrete ideas for things to take forward. So just wanted to make that important point. So please stay with us as the public hearing was our public highlight for this commission, but it's not the end of the outreach we'll be doing over the next 6 months before the commissioners launch their final report. We're looking to work with you on establishing those. So please continue to be engaged with the commission. Seek us out if you want to know ways on how to do that. So just wanted to make that point. Thanks, Frank.
I'm Steve Snodgrass. I'm a psychiatrist and retired Army General. And I'd like to add to Catherine's report, her statement just now, of what the commission could do. One of the things that in my work, and I've probably spent as much or more time as any other specialist at Guantanamo on the defense side in the country, has been I've not seen a systematic review or compilation of the injury and damage to all the people who in fact were rendered, detained, and subsequently released that should be available. Jim Risen and Sherry Fink and Matt Apuzzo, New York Times last year, came close to writing about the legacy of torture. There's a nice profile there of that. But what it shows is we don't know what the damage and injury is. And I think that's a big part of the story for a number of Americans, and a big part of, in fact, your fellow citizens who can relate to that, either because of their religious convictions, their sense of humanity, their sense of just wanting justice in their communities. They need to understand that what happened here was damaging. And it was damaging to individuals as well as what you heard from Mr. Mora, damaging in terms of our national strategy. But it needs to be in detail and it needs to be vivid.
Thank you.
You just get up and I'm going to do that. My name's Holly Carter, and I've been in the business one way or another of trying to get to the answer I hope you're going to give me. You're not going to be putting this report out in the vacuum. The first thing you can say for a fact and certainty is you're going to have active opposition from what it passes to me. The question is, what are you doing? God knows George Soros knows how to do it. What are you going to do about activating that part of the media, which may be either objective or partial to what your report is going to recommend? Because the attack is going to be unremitting and constant. I think that's the same word. You have to go at it now. You say you have a plan for 6 months from now. You better have a plan right now for when that day comes, what you're going to do with the information. I wish I'd been here these 2 days. But what I'm confident wasn't here for these 2 days were active reporters sitting in their seats, one person after another, writing this down and taking it to the public. The amount of knowledge that gets to the public these days, which passes for the public media, is negligible. And we are in a time in which the best resources are stretched thin, trying to deal with the multiple horrors of public life today. So folks, put up a really great program of views and information, propaganda, dissemination, promulgation, and get out and kick ass.
Thank you.
My name is Todd Pierce. I'm a retired Army major and Guantanamo defense attorney. I also helped on a civil suit on behalf of Mohammed Jawad, which was eventually dismissed, like all these civil suits are when they are brought against government officials for the damages that the officials have done to the plaintiffs. And maybe this only strikes me as particularly egregious and outrageous, but here's why all these cases are dismissed. I find it absolutely perverse. But just reading very quickly regarding one case, for example, there's many more. Alleged abusive treatment and torture in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2003 and 2004, authorized or condoned by individual defendants, included beating, stabbing, mutilation, hooding, confinement in phone booth-sized wooden box, prolonged sleep deprivation caused by beatings, inadequate food and water, mock execution and death threats, sexual assault, exposure to dangerously high temperatures for prolonged periods, inadequate medical care, painful restraints in positions, and intimidation with vicious dogs. A series of these cases, a long list of these cases, and all of them are dismissed because the offending officials were acting within the scope of their employment. That's right out of Nuremberg, saying we are just following orders. Maybe I'm the only one that's really outraged by this, and this is being done to the American people. But this, I'm reading this off of a brief filed by the U.S. government to defend or to explain why the case has to be dismissed against a series of officials who were guilty of all these acts beyond a doubt. And so I'd suggest one thing is to advocate for an opening for civil suits to be brought against these sorts of officials, that if they were Germans and it was back in 1945-46, they'd be in front of Nuremberg, in front of the Nuremberg Tribunal. So that's one suggestion of mine.
Thank you.
I building on what Steve Zanakis said about harm. I just want to emphasize that harm goes further. And I think one of the themes is that when a country engages in torture, it causes harm to the entire society. It causes harm to local government, from Johnston County to North Carolina. It causes, and especially concerning to me, it causes harm to an independent civil society, which is such a vital part of any vibrant democracy. When you have, in our case, the health professional organizations deferring to the national security sector, the bar associations, some cases the press that wouldn't use the word torture until the government used it. We have the entire society being corrupted. And I think that's one theme I'm hoping that you will bring out, that this is not, that it is, there is the horrible damage to those tortured, but there's also the damage to all of us and to our democracy.
back corner.
It seems like a subtext in discussions of torture is that it's a departure from normal, legitimate war, but certainly I don't know how important it is from a legal strategy, but we haven't had normally declared war. We've had this innovative term of enemy combatant. Certainly from a sort of a point of a moral narrative our society is having, I think that there is a real risk that we are sort of playing into that part of the way that torture works is it's a distraction, and it makes normal war look sort of sacred and acceptable in comparison. And so I just wonder how we can keep this question. Colonel Wilkerson just mentioned undeclared war. I don't know if there's a way with a legal strategy to keep the fact that we don't have legitimate wars going on according to the way of the Constitution. That's sort of an elephant in the room to me, and I think if we don't keep it, it's part. So I don't know if there's reactions as far as specific strategies from keeping that in the picture, because otherwise I think we're kind of playing into the anti-democratic, militaristic kind of things.
Thank you. Right there.
Hi, my name is Nicola Radidi, and I'm a board member for Witness for Peace. And my question to you all, and maybe also a suggestion, is for those, I'm also a student, so I'm 20 years old. How are people my age who are entering the activism world able to access this? Because when this first started, a lot of us were in our 10s, 11s, 12, and starting to hear this information now, how, as someone like I am a board member and talk about public policy, kind of educate us about the atrocities that the U.S. commit, how are you all able to help plug in us who are willing and able and want to be educated about this, but may not have access to this information?
Run for office.
Well, and we have had really valuable contributions from students through some of the professors that have helped us and provided investigative materials and research, and that has been extremely valuable. I'm sure the professors can second me on that.
And just say, so if you're local, we always need help. Staff of the commission is me. You're going to have part-time. So if you would like to work with us, please find out.
In the very back.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those speakers that I can talk all the time. But you're here, and you can go to your professors and say you want to discuss this in class, so that's a good start. When I came in yesterday morning, I was hoping to see a lot of ministers' scholars. You know how everybody talks about, don't talk about politics and religion, but this sort of goes with both. I mean, this is the morals of the country. A country that's democracy is supposed to mean innocent until proven guilty, which obviously disappearing people and torturing them is the opposite of. So I think personally, ministers and professors, and I also hope to see people that look like lawyers here, should be addressed. If your friends or your teachers, talk to them about this. I mean, like, we are in an era, I mean, 8 years of Obama, this should have been more done. So we're now in a bad situation for this. But The Guardian was here yesterday, for whoever says about the press, and I mean, I would have liked to see more. So talk to people, tell people, stay attention to this.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
Building on a couple, first, thank you very much for this. It's for somebody who does represent, someone in Guantanamo. It's been inspiring and really, we often feel that either we're forgotten or despised entirely. So it's nice to know that that's not entirely true. I think that the commission could think about talking about the Islamophobia that underlies the ability, I know from coming from the death penalty world, it's much easier to kill people and to torture people who are monsters and who have been made monsters and are not human, who have been removed from the family of human beings by a kind of rhetoric and a kind of dehumanizing media tactic. And there are, North Carolinians who are Muslims. There are wonderful alliances within the churches and people of faith that could help with that, I think, and just expose it, the amount of Islamophobia that underlies this ability to torture people. And then the other thing is to do think about the suggestion that was made to think about direct services, that you may not be able to solve some of these gigantic policy issues. I mean, they take solutions that are implemented and believed in at a much higher level than we see anybody believing in human rights these days in our country. But, to find a way to, if Johnston County could adopt a family who suffers from torture, or adopt a region, or provide, we know therapeutic intervention helps people who suffer from torture. We know that that's true. Medical, psychological, social work, to find people that could provide, which would also give us what we need, which is narratives of human beings helping human beings. Thank you. Thank you, Jim.
We're in the back here.
It's not a question of comment. We've been asking you what you can do. We've been asking what the media can do. But all of us can write letters to the editor because they are short-staffed and they want to hear what we have to say. And if everyone wrote a letter to the editor that we swamped with 250 letters, then something's going to get accomplished. The News Observer did an excellent article on Christina yesterday. You can comment on that. But they are influenced by an influx of letters, and we mentioned Burr's name because his staff will see his name and get him to read this report. So it's not just the commission or the media, it's all of us, and that's why we're here. Let's continue this work.
So there are many hands up, and I am quite confident that everybody has really valuable contributions to make. I would please encourage you to come and talk to us, but more importantly, write down your thoughts and send it to info@nccit.org. We will look at all of them. You can also find out the contact information on the NCCIT website. But your thoughts now, your thoughts tomorrow, your thoughts next week, if you continue to think about this, they'd be very valuable for us all to hear. Thank you. But we're not done. We're not done.
Right. Christina?
Sorry, this is really, what can we do next? If we don't have your email address, because you did your RSVP, which is fine, or you didn't sign up on the table out there, please do leave it with us, because we do want to stay in touch with the people who are interested in the work of the commission and continue this conversation about how to forward the recommendations that the commission comes up with. So we want to stay in touch with you. Do we have a sign-up sheet still out at the table? There's at least paper, so please leave your name and email or phone number if you haven't done that yet.
Thank you, Christina. So in a moment, I want to turn to Commissioner Freeman for some closing remarks. Before I do that, there is somebody we would like to acknowledge. This is very much a citizen-driven commission. It got its origin based on the work of a committed group of activists, not only in Johnston County, but elsewhere. We heard from one of them today. And with that, and there are others who are here in the room who were part of that effort. And without in any way disparaging the work of the others, there is one individual without whom I do not think we would be here today, who has been instrumental in bringing this about, who has worked with founded North Carolina Stop Torture Now, and is chair of the board of the North Carolina Commission of Inquiry on Torture, and that is Christina Calgar. And Christina, would you please stand? our heartfelt thanks for your work, Christina. So, Jonathan.
Thank you. On behalf of the North Carolina Commission of Inquiry on Torture, I would like to thank you all here today in Raleigh and those online from around the world that have joined us for these hearings, and to the witnesses who have come from far and near to contribute to their expertise, specifically Mohamedou and Khadija, for their courage. It speaks to your dedication to justice and to humanity itself that you are spending your time to be here, to pay attention. I would also like to thank our co-chairs, Jennifer Daskell and Frank Goldsmith, for their guidance and leadership, and for the extra bathroom break last afternoon. Sir Winston Churchill once said that you can always depend on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. This inquiry, this effort, is an amazing step toward doing the right thing. I want to emphasize this because we've spent the past 2 days delving into the most dark, depressing actions of humankind. A systematic program inflicting pain and injury on multiple human beings to gain information that we know for a fact through multiple studies and personal experiences, including my own, that does not work. I mention this because it would be easy for us to leave here saddened for our government, our nation, and our global family. It would be easy for us to be more cynical about efforts to look for justice on this subject. It would be easy for us to have no hope at all. It would be easy. But I would put a challenge to us all, commissioners, citizens, and interested parties, to see that the glass maybe is not half full, but at least is a little full, because at very least, we are here. Due to the amazing work of Catherine Reed, Jess Porter, and the rest of the NCCIT staff, and to the commitment of Dr. Christina Cowger and the rest of the NCCIT board, we are here doing this work, committed to justice for the victims of torture and to the citizens and taxpayers of North Carolina and indeed the United States of America. We have heard from true American patriots who were and are involved in this work: Steve Kleinman, Glenn Carl, Sterling Thomas, Mark Fallon, Alberto Mora, Allison Kaysen, and many others. They are the canaries in the coal mine. And because of them, the staff, the board, the witnesses, and all of you, because of this hearing, we should feel and come away from this experience heartened and optimistic. Optimistic that we are at a time in history that information, even in an environment of secrecy, is harder to keep private. Optimistic that so many people are focused and understand the importance of this issue. Optimistic that the people of the caliber of Catherine and Jess and Christina are passionate and have devoted their professional careers to this issue. Optimistic that the women and men on this commission are and will remain committed to its goals: transparency, accountability, and prevention. God bless you all, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.